sorry sight of the V-car beached in the gravel here at Silverstone. The red flag is out. At the moment it is the two Mercedes cars at the top of the time sheets. What kind of weekend do you think they can expect? Obviously something of a surprise win for George Russell in Austria, but you know, you have to be in it to win it. You've got to be ready to capitalise when others do make mistakes, and really their trajectory has been looking very positive, hasn't it?
It has. I mean, they're always there or thereabouts. They're always maximising what they have. That's the great thing about Mercedes. They're such a great team. But yeah, they're definitely missing a little bit around a circuit like Austria. Maybe here with a different aero, you know, it's predominantly an aero track. We'll see how good they are.
I'm cautiously optimistic they'll be better here than Austria. I think they feel pretty buoyant. The body language coming out of the engineers and the team when you talk to them, without going into details, is that this is a track that should suit their update that they started bringing in since Monte Carlo, and they think they've unlocked the performance. You know, we've seen this, right? The way McLaren and Mercedes have recently started to understand how they move the wings. You know, that's been the big talking point. Red Bull have complained about it, which is ironical since they sort of pioneered the bending wings in Jensen's era against them. You know, but I think what is so impressive is if you can control the movement and get it to work in the way that you want and produce front downforce when you want it and bleed it off, more importantly, when you don't want it, to get that balance between fast and slow corners. That's the holy grail with these ground effects cars, and that's what Mercedes have started to unlock, and I think around the circuit they could be more competitive. Well, interestingly, coming into Austria, they looked very quick in the single practice session that we had. We actually thought they'd perform better. Now, ultimately, they did get the win, but that was more through opportunity than out pace. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They both, when we spoke to them yesterday on the F1 show, were in a great mood, weren't they? Really buzzing.
Yeah, so it's good. You know, we got three extremely talented British drivers on the grid, all with a chance of stepping on the podium. I mean, it's been a while since we could say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time there were four, was it yourself, Lewis, Paul Resta,
and Max Chilton?
Max Chilton,
2013,
yeah.
That was.
That's a while now, so when Ollie comes in next year, it'll be a 12-year gap.
That makes me feel quite old, actually, because we've been around that long as well,
yeah.
Sky, haven't we?
And okay, you would say, you know, with the three now, that they're all in, as we just mentioned, all in competitive cars, which is great to see, so they can really show their talent. When they're sort of mid or back of the grid, it's a lot more difficult, as Ollie might find out. Unless they have a big upgrade next year.
So just to go back to Ollie for a moment, and what kind of team do you think he is going into?
I think a good one for him. Ayo Komatsu is the team principal. You know, he's used to working with young drivers. He worked with the Gravity driver program at Enstone. So people like Esteban Ocon, you know, they worked with him back then. He's very good at helping molding young drivers. Because Ollie's objective is not to be at Haas for the whole long term. He wants to be in a Ferrari in a couple of years' time, so we'll see.
So we've missed around 4 minutes of the session with a red flag after Yuki Tsunoda beached his car, and that's somewhat frustrating. But let's talk a little bit more about Ollie Behrman, because we're hearing, obviously, that he has signed for Haas for next year. Actually, let's hear from him right now, and we'll discuss what that opportunity means for both him and the rest of the grid.
I'm really proud and really happy to say that I'll be on the grid full time. Jeddah was a bit of a taste of what it's like, so I'm looking forward to being back in Australia, even though it's still 8 months away. But yeah, I'll be doing everything in the meantime to make sure I'm as ready as possible.
And what does that mean? What's the preparation? What's doing everything you can to be as ready as possible? Because Saudi looked like you were pretty ready.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I will keep gaining experience within F1, have a few more free practice sessions, and a few more testing days with Ferrari. So now I know my future, I can use those in a bit of a different way. But also, personally, off track, I want to improve my technical knowledge about F1 slightly, because it's a bit of a step from F2, honestly, in terms of the setup of the car and the amount of tools you have, but also about the weekend structure and you know, tire allocation and things like this. These are things that you don't think about it, but it's a huge step from Formula 2, and you need to be ready for it. So and physically as well, need to improve my neck.
Yeah, he needs to be ready for it. Needs to jump between them two as well, as we've already discussed. So we're talking a bit more. Okay, here's a replay actually of Yuki Tsunoda losing it at Luffield and beaching car. His session is over, and that's really frustrating for him, isn't it?
Yeah, it's losing it that early in FP1. It's tough for a driver. Yeah, especially around Silverstone. It's a track they all love to get out on, but it's this track you also want to build up all the way through the session and get more and more confidence. So he's lost that.
We heard Will Joseph saying earlier, didn't we, that the track grip level is going to be low, and so to that point, you want to wait to build up. But the engines are firing up because the track will go green in 10 seconds time. So we've already got the queue forming down at the end of the pit lane. Now, we should point out actually that the order in the pit lane is jumbled up here, isn't it?
Yeah.
At Silverstone, it's not the normal. Yeah, it's not the normal championship order because of the location of the pit garages. Some of them can't be seen by the fans of the grandstand. So we, you know, in an unconventional way, it all gets jumbled up. So shall we say the heavy hitters can be seen by the
fans' favourites.
So they're in the middle. Good word. Fans' favourites.
Just back to Behrman, though, we're talking about the team he's going into, the leader in Ayu Komatsu, who's clearly a massive fan of his and is going to bring him on. And he's in safe hands, isn't he? But as you mentioned, it is a stepping stone for a Ferrari seat. I mean, clearly won't happen straight away, but he's certainly going in the right direction, isn't he?
Well, we know that obviously going to have Leclerc and Hamilton for the next 2 years. What's going to happen in 2027? You know, I think, you know, we've seen a big shuffle of the driver market, and it's still shuffling as we know at the moment. But I think in 27 there's going to be another reset. You know, Fernando's going to be 45 at that stage.
Young pup.
Is Lewis going to carry on beyond, you know, at the age of 42? I guess he'll be at that point.
Yeah, he will.
So yeah, exactly. But I think there's another shuffle coming there, because what does Verstappen do and things like that. So for Ollie, if he can have 2 solid years at Haas and earn his credibility, I guess, as a solid F1 driver, then launch himself into a top team, that'll be brilliant.
But he's also sort of under the radar a little bit, which is what you want. Your first year in Formula One, you want to be in a midfield to the back of the F1 grid, so you can gain the experience of racing on all the tracks, working with your engineers, the pressures that come with that.
Well, there's much hype around him. How good do you believe he is?
I don't know. You know, it's difficult. You look at results in F2 and you say, well, not so competitive. But then I've heard that the team haven't quite got to grips with the new car, the new package. What he did in Jeddah was very impressive. We've also seen De Vries and a Williams be very impressive on a one race outing. And then when he did a full season, was less impressive. So when you have a contract in F1, it definitely changes you mentally, and then the way that you think about racing and the pressures that are on you. So that's why it's good he's in a team that's lower down the grid. You throw him in a Ferrari, there's going to be too much pressure for him. He's not going to be able to show his talent. You tighten up. And that's the worry with a lot of young drivers coming into the sport. You know, Fantinelli is in the Mercedes next year. That's a lot of pressure on your shoulders to be trying to fill Lewis Hamilton's shoes.
Absolutely. Talking of big shoes to fill, Ted Kravitz down in the pit lane.
Thank you. So the other thing Behrman has to do in this session is sort out, get a read together with Nico Hülkenberg. Obviously, he's in for Magnussen as Behrman in this session. The upgrades, and they are quite numerous. There are 7 different upgrades that Haas have this weekend. There's a new floor, the floor fences just going before the start of the floor edge. The side pod is new as well, as is the engine cover, and the rear corner together with the rear brake ducts as well. So quite a lot new on the Haas to understand, and good that Behrman is getting that done. I can just update you if you didn't already realise with Lance Stroll, we heard that braking problem earlier. It was just, as I believe, an electronic reset. They didn't have to take the brakes apart and bleed them again. It was all quickly solved down at Aston Martin.
Well, that's a relief. Thank you, Ted. And just on Haas, I mean, they're in a good place at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, that looked very strange. He looked like a very low grip in turn 4. And I don't think he actually had an issue.
Is that just about the track evolving and gripping up?
No, but it's yeah, the low grip, fair enough. But this is that was a strange one where he drove off the that's not even a corner in an F1 car, turn 5. it's flat, easy with the DRS open. So, yeah, unusual. It's interesting to look at the times. Max was flying around there. He was half a second up. So, oh, here we go. Max and Red Bull are going to be to the top. But no, George put in a stunner as well. So Mercedes and George Russell still on top.
And just Bottas, Hulkenberg and Stroll on the medium compound tyre. Just back to the Haas for a moment, because they are riding something of a crest of a wave after that incredible performance in Austria. Actually, in doing so, reclaiming 7th in the Constructors over Alpine. I mean, that's a big deal, isn't it?
That's a massive deal for them. And, you know, they seem to be masters of the Austrian Grand Prix.
Well, I was talking to Ayo about this yesterday, because what I didn't realise is he's still very involved in the strategy. You know, as he's a former race engineer, then chief engineer, now team principal. And you know, none of the other 9 team principals really get involved in terms of the strategy, I think, in an active, proactive way. But he still does. And that is a symptom of them being a small team. You know,
multitaskers.
It's very much about, yeah, roll your sleeves up, get stuck in. And that's how they made it work, actually, was they went aggressive with the strategy, went early on those 2 stops, and then there was a bit of confusion because the drivers started battling each other instead of managing the tyres. And we heard Kevin Magnussen have a pretty punchy reply when he was told to manage tyres.
What we love to hear.
Yeah, but I said, you know, fair play to them. They knew to make it work. They had to be aggressive on those calls, and they genuinely deserve those points because they earned it through a smart move.
And even with the fighting between the drivers, they still came away with a P6 and a PA. It's it's very impressive.
Do you think Magnussen's got a future in Formula One? Do you think he can hang on to his seat? Who do you see being Behrmann's teammate?
Oh, it's a tricky one, I have to say, with Kevin, because when he went away and was racing in IMSA for a little while, and when he came back to the sport, he was on it, wasn't he, from the word go?
Yeah.
And it seems that if his head's in the right place, he's got the performance. We all know that. Kevin's extremely quick, and we were teammates, so I know that. But I think when his head drops and the performances of the car aren't there, he struggles with that.
Ollie Behrmann on a set of soft tyres. So we're seeing people go with the soft tyre, you know, a bit earlier. Well, certainly Ollie's going. And I think this is, again, that practical thinking I was talking about earlier from Ayo and the Haas team, which is we need this guy to learn how to qualify in F1. We need him to really, you know, understand how you extract the extra grip that a soft tyre offers, even if it means the race drivers get one less set later on.
But also him looking good at the British Grand Prix in FP1 in front of the British public is probably good for sponsors as well.
Yeah.
Talking of a British team, we are delighted now to be joined by Zak Brown of McLaren. Zak, thank you very much for your time today on this beautiful summer's day in Great Britain. How are you?
Good to be here. Enjoying our British weather.
Absolutely. Right, 5 days on from the big incident in Austria. It's pretty impressive how Lando seems to be very calm about it. He seems to have moved on. Do you share those sentiments? Is that a team approach?
Yeah, we obviously have some concerns over what happened last weekend, but that was last weekend. Andrea and I will address those to make sure the rules are consistently enforced. But from Lando's perspective, he can't unwind. He can just learn from last weekend and give maximum effort this weekend, which is what he's focused on.
And what specifically do you think he has learned?
That's a good question. I think he knows it's pretty tough out there, and needs to just put himself in a position to make sure that doesn't happen again. But you know, I think more of the responsibility is on the stewards to be more consistent in their policing of the regulations. Also, a little unfortunate that you know, all of us teams are privy to what we see on the data, and maybe don't encourage our drivers, because you know, until someone tells Max that what he's doing is outside the regulations, I don't blame Max. He's driving at the limit. He's a world champion, so until someone tells him what he's doing isn't correct, I wouldn't expect him to drive any differently. So I think the issue is really on pit wall and getting some more consistency around our stewarding.
So you don't expect Max to change, but do you think the rules of engagement between the two drivers will? Because, you know, they're driving at the sharp end now. In your McLarens, do you expect anything to alter in the dynamic between Oscar and Max, or indeed Lando and Max?
Well, all these Grand Prix drivers race each other very hard, so I wouldn't expect that to change. We just need better enforcement of what the rules are. But I expect Lando, Oscar, Max, and all the drivers out there to race each other as hard as they're allowed to.
Zach, can I just pick you up on that? When you're talking about better enforcement, what do you actually mean? Because Max got the penalty, didn't he? He got a 10-second penalty and the penalty point. So what is it that you think more needs to happen in terms of this enforcement you mentioned?
Well, I thought Anthony Davidson on your show did a fantastic job of, in a very articulate manner, demonstrating what's moving under braking. And I think had that been flagged earlier, then maybe the incident that happened wouldn't have taken place. So I think after you have a few moving under braking, there should have been a flag and then ultimately a penalty. And maybe that small touch they had would have never happened in the first place.
Hey Zach, it's Jensen. So Zach, last year you came here with an upgraded car and you performed extremely well, just off of the Red Bulls. Here, do you think you can go one better? Does it feel that you have the package to do that? And obviously your correlation seems to be working very well. Wind tunnel, simulator, track. Where do you feel you are right now?
Yeah, I see no reason why we can't pick up on the same form we've had here, you know, these last half a dozen races. So I'd like to think we're in with a shout at running for pole in the race win. Mercedes clearly continue to go from strength to strength, and I think every race weekend Max has to come into it as the favorite, and Ferrari's always in the game. So yeah, I see no reason why we can't be competing for the win this weekend, but it won't be easy.
Well, Zach, you're an adopted Brit. We love you over here in the UK. And what's it like to be at the team's home race, to have all these fans? I mean, there's a huge amount of papaya out there in the grandstands.
Yeah, we love it. The British Grand Prix is awesome. The fans were here bright and early. Weather didn't deter anybody, and this is an awesome race. And hopefully we can go one better than we did last year. So the McLaren and Lando Mania is awesome to see, and of course George and Lewis aren't short of a few fans here as well.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for your time, Zach. All the very best this weekend.
Cheers.
Now, we talk a lot about Lando and his chances. What about Oscar? It feels like he's been slightly under the radar. Obviously, he had that time in SQ3 deleted in Austria. It would have put in Q3, apologies. He could have, therefore, been the one that capitalised on the win had he been where he was due to start. I mean, ifs, buts and maybes. That wasn't the case, but it feels as if he is ready for a big weekend as well.
He's been very quick, hasn't he, in terms of the quali pace. I think he's still a shade behind Lando on the Sundays. But actually, I think Austria was quite encouraging because he was stuck in traffic, stuck in dirty air. And yet, if you look at his overall pace, whenever he had those chunks of time with a bit of free air in front, he was as quick as Lando and had the tyres towards the end to attack and get close to George. So, and he was good here last year, wasn't it, JB? Qualified third and drove a good race behind Lewis last year.
Well, we also saw his pace in the sprint race, didn't we, in Austria? So it's definitely there, but I agree with you. Qualifying's been extremely strong, but the race, the consistency that Lando has is very impressive, and I think there's a little bit still to find there for Oscar.
Now we see that Carlos Sainz on the hard compound is at a 1:27 in top spot in the timesheets. Now we heard Guan Yu Zhou talking about the car jumping around in turn 1 and turn 9 a bit earlier in a radio message. We also saw a return of the porpoising for the Ferraris in Austria. Is this the kind of track that would highlight that potential weakness in the car?
Yes, very fast, but also a lot of bumps here on the track. And you feel it even if you drive a road car around here. You can feel the road moving, undulations of the road. And you can see it there through cops as well, the car bouncing. And in the slow-mo, it's a lot easier to see it, but even at full speed, you see the car bouncing through there. And that just takes away confidence from a driver because the aero isn't stable at that moment in time, and you feel there's any moment you could lose the rear.
So no evidence of it as yet, or no reports of it from the Ferrari drivers. Sainz the only one in the 127s.
Be interesting
Will you
to
be
see.
worried?
It'd be interesting to see what happens if they're not using DRS on the straight there, because normally when you have DRS, you don't have the porpoising as much. So be interesting to see.
Okay, so as I mentioned, Carlos Sainz top of the timesheets on that Howell compound tyre with a 127.9. So the rain has held off, and we were predicting more of it, certainly. We're concerned, but it looks like it's going to brighten up, or at least continue to do so throughout the weekend.
Does it?
It's more hope than expectation.
There's supposed to be some rain tonight, isn't there?
Yeah.
And then hopefully dry for tomorrow. I don't know. Do we want it to be dry? I mean, it's nicer for the fans and everything, but in terms of qualifying in the race, it's pretty good when it's wet or mixed conditions around here.
I think it's good to have dry practice sessions so that they get lots of running in, and then a little sprinkling just to mix things up.
Yeah, don't give them any practice in those tough conditions.
No.
Let's let them just jump straight into it in the race. It definitely makes for a better show.
Well, we have seen plenty of great shows in those changeable conditions here. I think back to Lewis's first win in 2008 in those damp conditions. He talked about it yesterday, and as we're seeing a replay of him now.
Well, it was more than damp, wasn't it? It was torrential. It was. I was in a commentary box, and it was raining inside the commentary box.
What?
Well, you guys were aquaplaning, weren't you? That chicane up at the old Abbey chicane. There were people just aquaplaning off all through. It was horrendous, right? Yeah, I know.
Up in the gravel.
Yeah, but hang on, explain why it's raining in the commentary box.
More importantly,
I wasn't building the box, but it was definitely raining down the screens that we were watching.
Okay, well, if you look at the weather conditions there, looks pretty decent.
It's a beautiful
I'm a Northampton
British
girl,
summer.
and that looks to me like a balmy day in the Rose of the Shires.
Yeah, fire up the Barbie. Let's get some
your whole
sausages on
family
that.
home back there in the background. That's kind of.
But Lewis talked about 2008 with, such happy nostalgia yesterday. It was a momentous occasion, and actually for him, he said that it was the start of his great relationship with the fans. When you come back here and you see the support, I mean, I see the roars of the crowd. Did you walk past even now, Jensen?
Yeah,
what's it like?
I think for Lewis, it was an unbelievably difficult race, extremely wet, as Karun said, aquaplaning, which is never a nice feeling, being out of control in a racing car at such high speeds. And he came out on top. He destroyed the rest of the field. But also, it was at home. So it was a really special race for him, and I'm sure it's one of his fondest memories in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And but in terms of the fan engagement, I mean, I feel like the crowds here are so knowledgeable. They're so passionate. They're also so respectful. They seem, I mean, obviously they've got their favourites, but they seem to really get behind the sport as a whole.
They're very supportive of everyone. They do have their favourites, and you can normally tell by what they're wearing. But they're always cheering all the drivers. It's kind of funny because it's like you know them, because you've seen them every year. They're basically in the same place every year. And they're like, hey, Jensen, how you doing? And it's a funny relationship you have with the fans here at Silverstone. And they are very knowledgeable, as you said.
Yeah, and I think that is all the more strengthened by social media, because there's a community of fans.
Well, the Ted Kravitz fan club is amazing.
It's massive.
It's massive. There's T-shirts and flags
I am a member.
and all sorts, I did see you wearing your T-shirt today.
A quick change in the commentary box to put my Ted Kravitz appreciation T-shirt on.
Beautiful.
Great stuff. Okay, we've got just over 26 minutes to go. So welcome back, and it is Lewis Hamilton, who has, of course, won here 8 times before, been on pole 7 times before. What chance of him emulating that this weekend?
Well, I think he has every chance. When you look at the times now and how good the car looks out on track, they've been a little bit off the pace in the last couple of races, but they're definitely getting closer to McLaren and Red Bull. And they have 2 guys that always perform extremely well here. So I cannot wait to see where they are when we start pushing a little bit more later this session, and obviously into P2 and P3.
And it's Max Verstappen who's just gone quickest, much to the delight of that young girl with a 1:27.7. And we can head down to the pit lane. Actually, to hear a bit more, I'm hoping, about Mercedes upgrades. Ted?
Yeah, so now people are starting to put the softer range of the tyres on. Medium for Verstappen, medium for Russell, medium for Lewis Hamilton as well. Let me just tell you what Mercedes have got to try and optimise their car around this very high-speed circuit. And 3 of the upgrades are circuit-specific. A trimmed-out front wing, a trimmed-out rear wing with a re-profiled upper flap to that, and a smaller front brake duct as well. But there's something on the rear corner, around the brake duct and the cake tin, which of course surrounds the rear brakes, which is a performance upgrade to the Mercedes. So yeah, 4 upgrades for the Mercedes, and they're up there with Verstappen and Sainz at this early stage, Natalie.
Yeah, certainly are. George Russell just going second on the medium compound tyre. Just how much of a boost is it to get a second Grand Prix notched up win, that is, for George? Their first, actually, since Sao Paulo in 22.
Yeah, it's lovely for the team, isn't it? Especially coming into the British Grand Prix for George. You'll take every win you can in this sport. You've got to be there at the end. And he obviously performed very well the weekend and was in front of Lewis, which is always a great performance. So yeah, it's a nice win for them heading into their home Grand Prix.
How will Lewis feel about it? I mean, he'll obviously want to see the team doing well and the trajectory continuing in the right direction, but it's tough for him, isn't it, knowing that he's leaving the team, being outperformed by his teammate, knowing that naturally the team are inevitably gonna hide information data from him, because that's what happens, isn't it?
I'll be surprised. They won't be treating them any differently. They'll have exactly the same equipment. It's the way that team works. And also Lewis has achieved so much with that team. But as a driver, though, we're all very insecure individuals, so I'm sure it affects him in some ways, especially when he sees George doing so well.
Well, you've got half an eye on the Ferrari garage as well, haven't you?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I agree with Jensen. I think of all the teams in the pit lane, I think Mercedes are very good about parity and giving both drivers an equal opportunity to do well. We saw that Nico versus Lewis time, the intensity of that championship battle, but they made sure they got the upgrades at the same time. You know, they didn't want to favour one driver at all. And you know, but it's been tough for Lewis. He's 11-3 down in qualifying against George this year, including the sprint qualifying. So that's amazing. To me, you know, qualifying was his big strength against all of his teammates, including Jensen, right, in the past. So
thank you for that.
Well, just sorry, but I think it's just you know, I think it's been a tough run for him. Whether this weekend, being on home soil, a track where he's been super successful in the past, just is a catalyst for him to turn the tide. It'll be interesting to see. But so far, you know, similar run plans and tyres, he's a couple tenths behind, which is kind of where he's been to George so far.
A tough run too for Ferrari, and that won't have escaped his notice, Jensen. You look at obviously the highs of Monaco for Charles Leclerc. Not much really has happened since. Finished 11th in Austria. Same for his teammate. You know, they've shown bursts of promise and then it's fallen away. Is that about the other teams catching up, overtaking them, or is that about them sort of dropping the ball?
Well, they still have a car that seems to work on certain tracks and not others, and that's, you just can't do that these days in F1. When you look at the Red Bull, it's competitive everywhere. Maybe Monaco's their Achilles heel, yeah, I think they just need more consistency with the way that the car is developed, I guess.
And of course, this is a happy hunting ground for both of their drivers. Best result for Charles, P2 here in 21. But of course, that maiden win for Carlos Sainz in 2022. All right, Ted, what have you got for us?
Update on the test drivers. Well, at least two of them. So Isaac Hadjar has been doing a lot of test items. So don't take his rather lowly position at the bottom of the timings as any reflection on his ability, Natalie. In fact, a moment ago, he was being sort of reseated with the seatbelts in the cockpit. It looked like the seatbelts weren't quite right for him. And a burly mechanic was sort of tightening up Isaac's seatbelt. But it looks like he's about to come back in to the pits. And poor Jack Doohan. Do you remember the last time, guys, Jack Doohan got in for a practice session and it was raining and he managed like one lap? Was it Canada?
Canada.
And it's happened again because he's had his running curtailed by an issue with the left rear corner of the car. It looked like it was a problem with the brake drum. Yeah. Doohan has been in the garage for a while, but is back out on track now. Looks like one of the Red Bulls is about to come in. Is it Verstappen or Hadjar? I'll find out for a moment. So, yeah, not all plain sailing for the substitutes so far.
We're seeing Hadjar out on track here, Ted. He's come through the first sector. I'll tell you who is going very quickly is Oscar Piastri. He's just put on a brand new set of soft tyres. So this is going to be the first soft tyre benchmark we see from McLaren, I think. Norris is in the pits. Piastri does go to the top of the times at the end of that lap, but not a big jump ahead of Verstappen, though. So, yeah, there's still a reasonable amount of experimenting going on, I think, between the teams.
You don't normally see a big shift, medium to soft, do you, in terms of lap time?
You still
around Silverstone.
Yeah, I think I've still seen 3 or 4 tenths, and I guess he was a long way down, but I think, to me, that's not representative of the gap, what I mean, between the soft and the medium. It's more, I think it's more than a tenth there. So my conclusion is maybe McLaren running a bit more conservative on engine, because actually, as Jensen well knows, this is a super power sensitive circuit, actually. So if you can get a bit more engine mode and you get a bit more power, the lap time just comes. You know, it really pays back much more than some other tracks. Austria is obviously another one, but yeah, this is a very power sensitive circuit.
And how much does the circuit ramp up through the weekend? We're going to see plenty of running here in other categories as well.
It all depends on, it does ramp up, but it all depends on which direction the wind's at, really. That's what affects you a lot more than the circuit gripping up.
And I don't think it ramps up as much as we saw Hadjar just drop a wheel a little bit on the exit of Luffield. I don't think the track ramps up necessarily as much as Austria. It's a bit like Barcelona, right? Because Silverstone gets used. Yeah. Despite the British winter, it gets used, you know, probably nearly 300 days a year. So it's not a track that's completely green for the rest of the year.
Okay, well, a quick reminder for our Sky Sports F1 viewers that you are able to jump on board with any of the 20 Formula One drivers on this year's grid. Watch every session this season from your favourite driver's perspective and listen in on their team radio. To get started, all you need to do is download the Sky Sports app to your phone or tablet device, which you can do by scanning this QR code on the screen. Once you're there, log in with your Sky ID and head to the Sky Sports F1 channel to choose your driver. Sky Glass, Sky Q and Sky Stream customers, you can also access this experience via the interactive button on your remote control. And this is also available to Now customers. Be sure to download the app or hit your interactive button to experience even more action this weekend. And that's exactly what we're hoping for. Plenty of action. And Jensen, we know that there are plenty in this fight. How many do you think could be in with a decent, realistic chance of pole tomorrow?
I mean, you know that the Red Bull's going to be there. But apart from that, you'd look at McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari and go, well, they're all in with a shout, aren't they? We won't know until we get to qualifying. It's that close. You know, under 3 tenths is covering the top 6, which is 4 different teams. So, yeah, I love how competitive it is at the moment, Formula One.
So that little stat there on Daniel Ricciardo as we ride on board with him, 6 points finishes in his last 7 appearances at Silverstone. He does enjoy it here. Celebrated his birthday this week and his 250th Grand Prix in Austria. 2 points finishes in the last 3 Grand Prix. He needs to have a strong weekend this weekend. What's your feeling about his future, Karim?
It's one of the big questions, isn't it? What is Red Bull going to do in terms of Daniel and Liam Lawson? We know Yuki Tsunoda has been re-signed. We know Perez has been re-signed. We know Verstappen's got a contract. So actually, off the 4 Red Bull seats, it's that Daniel versus Liam battle that is the only pending one. I don't know if they'll actually decide anytime soon. I feel like they hold the cards there really. In terms of the timing of it, unless, I don't know, maybe Daniel's gonna go somewhere else. Maybe he's got an option to go somewhere else that I don't know. But it feels like Red Bull can drag that decision out as long as they want before they have to make it.
Interesting, though, that they did make it with Yuki and Sergio sooner. Why do you think that was?
They'd obviously seen enough of Yuki because he'd done a good job, I think, at the start of the year. He's had a strong start of the season, and they decided to re-sign him. I think signing Sergio was a tough one for Daniel because, as we all know, Daniel's come back into the junior team in the hope of getting into the big team, right? So getting Sergio there suddenly raises the question marks as to, hang on a second, do they need Daniel? Or is that team, again, going back to its roots, where Daniel started, or bringing in young drivers? So in which case you put Liam in.
Yeah.
So I think it's there's a philosophical question, I think, that is yet to be answered at Red Bull of why is RB on the grid? Is it there to get experience like Daniel and push the whole team forward, or is it there to train up young drivers, which is why it was bought and started in the first place, in which case you put Liam in? And I think they need to answer that philosophical question.
So why did they re-sign Checo so soon?
They obviously thought he was doing a good job alongside Max.
But he hasn't been.
Or they're just happy
when they signed him, he was closer. It's funny, after they...
Ironically, he had a poor run of form after re-signing. Interesting. And I suppose as well it's about keeping Max happy, isn't it? And Max does seem happy with Sergio alongside him in the garage.
I think Max is going to be fine with anyone alongside him personally, especially in a car like that suits him.
I think he'd care if they signed Lando Norris.
I don't think he would. I think he'd love the challenge, because he knows that car suits him. Maybe if Max was in a McLaren, it would be a different situation, a different scenario. But no, I think I'm surprised a little bit by the signing of Checo so early on. I don't know why they couldn't have waited a little bit longer, but team are obviously happy. But the thing is, it's so tight at the front now. You know, with 4 teams fighting for wins, you need both drivers to be up there fighting for wins, and Checo's not been there, has he, for a while? No,
personally, that's why the Sainz situation really confuses me, because I'm amazed he's not ended up in a Red Bull or a Mercedes. But personally, I think, you know, he's shown over the last few years that he's a top quality driver.
Yeah, but then I go back to my point. Is that not because Max would be happier with Sergio than he would with Carlos?
What are these guys doing, man?
Ooh.
Dawdling on the racing line.
Getting vocal.
I think that's probably the case with Carlos. They've had a few spats in the past, but I think with everyone else, it's fine. He's had that experience with Carlos, hasn't he? And it just didn't work out.
Well, the
relationship.
The dynamic between the drivers is significant, isn't it? And I wonder whether actually maybe Daniel's brought out the best in Yuki. I mean, Yuki does seem to have raised his game, doesn't he, this season? And perhaps I think that combination works.
I think he's calmed down. I think he's understood what he needs to do that, and that's changed him a lot in the way that he goes racing, and he's able to extract a lot more in a calmer state. For me, with Carlos, it feels that he should be in the Mercedes scene next year. You know, he has so much experience, and he's bringing experience from Ferrari also. It just feels like the right move for Mercedes and Carlos.
A short-term contract?
Well, who knows? I mean, that's the thing. You jump in there for a year contract, and then it's down to you. You go make the difference, and if he's good enough, he's going to have a drive. I mean, he's got to put himself against the best if he wants to win the World Championship.
I would have had him there for 2 years, because I do think the 2026 cars are so different with the way these engines and the aero rules are coming. I think having experienced drivers in 26 will be helpful, and having continuity between 25 and 26. And actually, a George Russell, Carlos Sainz lineup for Mercedes over the next 2 years, I think would be pretty strong, actually. And you can, to Jensen's earlier point, you can let Antonelli learn in a Williams under the radar. Because if you're putting him up against George straight away with new cars, new rules coming, that's a whole heap of pressure you're throwing at him. Yeah.
Well, it's Lando Norris who goes top of the timesheets with a 1:27.4 on the soft compound tyres, and Lance Stroll along, well, just a tenth off him, also on the softs. We haven't talked much about Aston Martin, the factory just a stone's throw from here. They've had a pretty poor run of late. How do you explain that?
I can't. It's surprising. They started the year obviously nowhere near as competitive as they did last year, but they still had reasonable pace. And again, like we saw last year, they just tail off through the season. The upgrades they bring just don't seem to make a difference. They seem to be very good at building a car for the first race, but then it's the upgrades that are hurting them throughout the year. But yeah.
Starting to drizzle. I wonder if Max knows the true definition of a drizzle. We as Brits certainly do, because we have it most days of our life. So I wonder how much that will impact things. Let's have a look at the radar.
I mean, he's half Belgian. It rains
does
an awful lot of Spa.
Does rain a lot in Spa. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, you can see the radar. It's just we're on the edge of that cloud that's just passed, isn't it? But there's definitely more bits coming. It seems it's like a scattering of rain. I'll tell you what, this always used to be the case. I used to live in Brackley, just 7 miles from here, and I'd always call one of my neighbours up to find out what was happening, because it would be sort of between 5 and 10 minutes later here. The wind, you know, more often than not is coming from that direction. So it was always quite handy to call up some of the neighbours to find out what was happening there.
But when you're racing here, Jensen, how do you cope with the fact it can be raining in one part of the track and not another?
Yeah, well, I just had that at Le Mans, so pretty much the whole race it was like that. So it's really tough when you arrive to a corner and you're not sure what it is, if it's going to be wet or dry. Obviously, now they have the radars and the team are on the radio pretty much the whole time. But yeah, I don't think we'll have that condition today anyway. It's a little bit of spitting, but that's not going to affect these tyres while they're hot.
Just coming back to Aston Martin, obviously Stroll second quickest so far. I mean, they had an appalling qualifying in Austria, didn't they? 15th and 17th, I think, or something like that. But big news there, they've obviously got a new boss. Andy Cowell has come in, taking over from Martin Whitmarsh. I'd love to get your take, Jess, because you worked with Martin at McLaren for many years. Presume you know Andy Cowell from Brixworth and Mercedes. What's your take on that?
I don't know him that well. I know Martin a lot more. I worked with Martin for many years at McLaren, but most of the time it was Ron Dennis and Martin, you know, so it was a little different. But no, he was good to get on with. He was a good team leader. But yeah, obviously I don't know what's going on inside Aston Martin at the moment. It's tricky for me to understand, not being close enough.
Interesting to try and get a read on their latest performance. Just a quick replay of Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, there's traffic up ahead. He's got his teammate, Charles Leclerc, and looks, I'm trying to work out, it's quite tricky to see who the other car is, but it looks like an Aston, wasn't it? They're all sort of just squabbling for position there.
What is he doing?
Stroll, wasn't it? Yeah, just strolling along.
Hey, there you go.
Got there before you. I think Piastri's just going slowly to get out of people's way, actually. He's in a messy part of the track. Ted, I think you've got something for us down there.
I think I have a hydraulic problem. The power steering's done and everything.
Copy. They're actually just having a look at it on the data. The mechanics at McLaren haven't come out into pit lane yet, Karun, to receive Oscar Piastri. So they're just taking a look whether it is an issue, whether he can make it back from where he is, just coming into the pit entry.
He's just
here.
made it in, Ted.
Come on, keep going, Oscar. It's just round the corner. Strange the McLaren mechanics actually aren't into the pit lane yet to receive him. Anyway, yeah, just picking up what you're saying about Aston Martin while I'm waiting for the Australian to make his way down the pit lane. What it seems to be what they're doing is hiring senior people from other teams. Bob Bell has turned up, the ex-Renault team principal, and it's the first time I've seen Bob Bell in an Aston shirt. Jensen, Nats and Karun, you haven't seen him. He's been with the team for a while, a recognisable face in Formula One. He was the man who actually took over from Flavio Briatore back in 2008 after the Singapore Crashgate scandal. Bob became the Renault team boss who had to take over and pick up the pieces from that. So well-known man in Formula One, well-respected engineer, and is now taking his place in the pit lane in Aston colours. Keep going, Oscar, or is he conked out?
He stopped.
I think he has stopped just outside the FIA garage. Expecting to see some McLaren mechanics just over my shoulder.
Well, they won't be
down
able to
the
go
pit
collect
lane.
him. He's outside the pit lane.
As they make their way up to him. Just over 6 minutes to go of the session, but how much of a concern will that be, Jensen? Power steering issue.
Yeah, it's well, he said a full hydraulic issue, I think.
Right, over.
Yeah, if it was power steering, he could still drive back to the pit. So I think it's a full hydraulic issue with the car, which obviously the power steering is hydraulic, so that's where he's felt it first.
The pit entry is closed. There's one of the cars there who was trying to come into the pits, I think, but is now being forced to go down. Is that Stroll?
How do you close the pit entry? What if a guy's going to run out of fuel?
Well, I think you would then come in and argue the toss and say...
Yeah, but I mean, there's still room. There should be just yellow flags in the pit entry.
Maybe it's because they've got to send marshals to walk down the pit lane, as I think they have there. So, you know, you can't have marshals walking down with the car.
And they wouldn't stop the session for that.
That's what you do with this wave, double wave yellow.
I guess so. I mean, the race director's office is only about 30 feet from here. Go tell him.
Safety first, I get it.
So, Ferrari, they were a bit downbeat yesterday when I was chatting with the Ferrari drivers.
Well, they have fun taking penalties against each other in the F1 show, but you're right, they were sort of managing expectations coming into this weekend, weren't they?
Yeah, I think they were a bit concerned about high speed, bouncing. Oh, that was an ugly place to get a car.
I nearly crossed 3 laps.
I love the way that he knows it was that. He's going 180 miles an hour into there.
There's just nowhere for me to go in here.
Copy that. Okay, yeah, it is looking busy now, mate.
They've been tripping over each other, and we only saw one instance earlier. Oh, look at this. They've managed to get him around the corner. In fact, he's just below our commentary box right now. So pit lane should be opened again because they've got him out of the fast lane. So well done to the marshals who've cleared him off there.
Any idea how long a problem like that takes to resolve?
Well, it won't be out before the end of the session, and then they've got 2 or 3 hours, haven't they? So yeah.
Pit lane reopens with just over 4 minutes to go, and it's his teammate Lando Norris who is top of the time sheets with a 1:27.4, followed by Lance Stroll, which will make for happy reading for Aston Martin after, as we say, a difficult run. I mean, how much will this play on Fernando Alonso's mind? These new signings will certainly be a boost for the team, but you know, it feels like they're stalling. It feels like they're sort of in something of a holding pattern.
Well, next year it's not going to be a big improvement, is it? So that means he's got to hang around for 2026.
He is. We know he signed the contract to do so, but it's funny. I mean, last year it looked like he pulled a blinder by going to Aston, and you know, he's a driver who historically hasn't necessarily moved teams at the right time, and it looked like he got it absolutely spot on. I still think he has, because they're ahead of Alpine and have been ahead of Alpine since he joined the team. So it was still the right thing to do, to go from Alpine to Aston. But they're certainly not looking as strong a force as they did at the beginning of last season.
Well, they've certainly got a fight on their hands to stay ahead of the midfield, but as you've touched on already, both of you, those margins are just so very tight, aren't they? There is very little to choose between them.
Yeah, it's half a second covering just over half a second covering the top 10.
Which is great for us.
It is good for us, yeah.
Well, and we're getting used to this, aren't we? We're getting used to, even on big tracks, not just small ones like Austria, Monaco. We're getting big tracks, the whole field being under a second.
Yeah.
Which is super competitive.
Well, yeah, you bring an upgrade of 2 to 3 tenths, you leapfrog sort of 2 or 3 teams.
Yeah.
As Oscar Piastri is wheeled back into his garage with that hydraulics issue, and a couple of minutes remaining of the session, which gives us just enough time to wax lyrical again about just how great this track is. Just tell me what it feels like to race around here, Jensen, and actually where the key overtaking opportunities are.
Well, there's actually less corners than when I raced around here in a way, because these cars can go flat around turn 1, Copse, whereas we had to lift, didn't we, Karun?
I mean, the one I was driving, it was a brake.
Down 3 gears.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. You know, you still get the rush. The G-force that you get around here as a driver is massive. You know, going through Copse, then Maggots, Beckett's, where the change of direction is just phenomenal. And if you ever get a chance to watch a Formula 1 car, it should be Maggots and Beckett's. You watch these cars change direction, it blows you away, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think I met some fans this morning who've got a roving grandstand ticket, and as I was cycling, they said, "Where should we watch? We got roving grandstand." I just sort of shouted back, "Get to Beckett's," as I was pedaling through the rain, because I do think on the whole planet there are 2 places where I've been lucky to watch Formula 1 cars trackside. One is the S's at Suzuka, and the other one is on the outside of Beckett's. They are just, it's where you see an F1 car at its best, absolutely at its best.
And actually the first place I ever saw an F1 car when I was a little kid coming here, 20 minutes away, grew up in Northamptonshire, so it is lovely to come back. Nice close-up of Pierre Gasly, obviously sitting out that session for Jack Doohan. Re-signed for the team, re-signed for Alpine. just waiting to find out who his teammate will be for next year. And actually, a decent run for him, 4 consecutive points finishes. He'll have a big smile on his face at the moment, won't he? Is the future looking bright for him?
It's good, and I think as a team, I mean, we all know that the drivers have had their differences, but they've both performed well and both been in the points quite a lot over the last few races. So, yeah, it's good for them. I think they've lost a lot of weight, haven't they? The cars was a bit podgy.
I thought you meant the driver.
Well, they probably have as well, yes. But
well, there was a story, wasn't it, that they had one heavy chassis, one lightweight chassis for a few races. I was in Austria, so I don't know if Ted can add anything on that, but there was a while, I know, where they were flip-flopping between the heavy and the light car, which basically meant every weekend one driver was more grumpy than the other. But, you know, we're now getting to the halfway point of the season, and you imagine they've probably caught up a little bit.
How does Ocon approach the remainder of this year? He's obviously looking to secure his future. He's going to want a nice shot of Abby pulling there. She's having a great time. 60-odd points ahead of her nearest rival, Dorian Pan, in F1 Academy. Great to see her doing so well. Yeah, just how does he approach the rest of this year, Ocon, and where do you see him popping up for next year?
Jeez. Oh, he almost had enough.
Wow. Was that with Hadjar?
Sorry, mate. I couldn't see him.
Yeah. Baptism of fire there for Isaac Hadjar.
He was to the right-hand side.
He's apologising there. He knows he was in the wrong.
Yeah. This is the thing. High-speed corners, we shouldn't be going slow through high-speed corners.
Yeah.
It's just not the place to do it.
I genuinely am amazed in the last 4 or 5 years when they do these super slow, cool laps. We haven't had a car sent flying into the air. Honestly, it's so dangerous when you're going slowly in the high-speed corner. And also there, it's blind, right? You can't see around Abbey where he was. He couldn't have known where Lando was, so the team could have told him.
Could the team not have communicated
but then you have to get completely off the line and fully expect this car to be coming. You know, you really have to have your wits about you if you're going to go slowly through a high-speed corner.
A little heart and mouth moment then there for Norris and indeed for Hadjar. But just back to Ocon, what do you see him doing?
Well, he needs to perform on track and perform off track. I think that's a big thing, is performing in the media in the right way. And, you know, every team wants a driver that is obviously quick, but that they can work with as the engineers, the media team, marketing, and they don't want drivers that are conflicting. And
I tell you what, I have to say, I always find him an absolute joy to interview, but I know what you mean. There is that sense, that reputation, if you like, once the visor goes down, that he can become, yeah, perhaps a bit tricky, particularly with his teammates on track. Does that put other teams off, you think?
It can do, but it's easy to turn it around. So, you know, I think he's extremely quick, and he's just got to make sure that he has the right manner out of the car. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I think, yeah, he just needs to make sure that he's in the right frame of mind, being positive about where he is and what the team are giving him, because if he's getting equal treatment, that's great right now.
As the drivers use the remaining seconds of this practice session for some practice starts, how significant is the start on Sunday?
It is, but I think it's less so than some other places, because the battle carries on all the way down to Luffield, and sometimes even actually up to Copse, as we saw at Lewis and Max in 2021 famously. So it is important. The start's always important, obviously, but it's not something like Monaco or, you know, places like that where it has to be done into turn 1.
I would say it's one of the most exciting starts.
It is.
Yeah, we've seen some drama over the years.
Yeah, obviously the crashes we don't want, but in terms of the overtakes, there's been a lot of movement from the start to turn 1, hasn't there? A lot of positions changed.
And the slipstream is so powerful now that actually that's why you get that overtaking happening down the Wellington Straight, down again to Copse. So I'd say the opening lap, I would say, is more critical than the actual launch around this place.
So the stewards having a look at that incident between Hadjar and Norris after the session.
It's confusing because they can't really penalise him for the rest of the weekend, can they, Hadjar? He's not driving in it.
No.
I think it was a 3-point penalty, though, don't they? or something, or a 3-place penalty if he ever does race.
If he ever does race.
I've still got one, so.
It's a bit of a shame, though, isn't it, for him to finish his session like that, you know, on a bit of a downer.
Yeah.
What are your takeaways from the young four that have stepped in and stepped up for this session?
Behrman, you know, half a second off Hulkenberg, but he did his time much earlier in the session, so I think there's a bit of track evolution there. Surprisingly big gaps for the others, I think, actually. But here come the results, Nats.
Yeah, and it is Lando Norris with a 1:27.4 on the soft compound tyre, who tops the standings. Lance Stroll just a 10th behind him, and Oscar Piastri, Lando's McLaren teammate, in third. Max Verstappen could only manage fourth today in the first practice session. George Russell in fifth, and his teammate Lewis Hamilton in seventh. Carlos Sainz, the winner here in 2022, in ninth, and Esteban Ocon rounding out the top 10, also on the soft compound tyre. Bottom half of the table looks like this. Nico Hulkenberg in 11th, Daniel Ricciardo in 13th. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda getting beached at Luffield. He had a very curtailed session, difficult time for him. Ollie Behrman and the other 3 young drivers who stepped in, try and make their claim, their futures in Formula One.